Utility workers face many unique hazards and safety concerns, but few are as dangerous as traffic control. Our goal is to give you a foundation that will help you put into action an effective traffic control plan that will keep both workers and the public safe. Before we begin, let's look at some basic principles. When working on the road, the primary objectives are worker safety, motorist safety, and motorist mobility. Workers and motorists have an unwritten contract. The workers will install the necessary traffic control devices, and motorists will observe and obey them. If workers don't fulfill their side of the contract, then there is no way motorists can fulfill theirs. If we make the work zone safer for motorists, we also make it safer for workers. Workers must be constantly vigilant when working in the roadway, even in protected areas. Here's the most common typical layouts used in the utility industry. When work is completely off the roadway and is of very short duration, this typical layout requires the minimum amount of devices. Where a vehicle is present, use flashing lights. Where no vehicle is present, use cones. If work is completely off the roadway and is of short duration, it requires an advanced sign. Use the road work ahead sign, which is also known as the men at work sign. Where work encroaches on the roadway edge and is of very short duration, it too requires an advanced sign. When the work is of either very short or short duration that has a short work area and leaves a lane width of less than 3 meters in the lane adjacent to the encroachment, the visible center line will need to be displaced by using cones to create 2 lanes of traffic without having to close a lane. If work occurs on a 2-lane low-volume road, which is under 3,000 vehicles per day, and it has a short work zone, which is less than 150 meters, the yield to oncoming traffic sign or a traffic control person may be used. This typical layout is appropriate for conditions with good visibility, either geometric or weather. On all other 2-lane roads that do not meet the restrictive conditions of this typical layout, you will require 2 traffic control persons. When traffic control persons do not have a clear line of sight of each other, 2-way radios must be used to communicate. When a work area occupies 1 full lane of a multi-lane road on a non-freeway and is of a short duration, TL23 will divert traffic safely around the work zone. If you are performing work on a freeway with 1-lane closure that is of very short duration, you will use this typical layout, which requires a crash truck. There are 6 work zone components that you will find in most typical layouts: advanced warning area, approach area, transition area, longitudinal buffer area, work area, and termination area. Now when you look at each of your typical layouts, you will see the work zone components that are valid for your setup. Traffic setup and removal should be planned in advance to performing the work. Workers should pre-plan an escape route for errant vehicles and be aware of obstacles such as guide rails or deep ditches or adjacent signs. This will ensure that the escape route is safe for the worker to use. Determine what equipment is needed and what roles and responsibilities apply. Traffic control has 4 steps. Step 1. Pre-work preparation. Step 2. Tailboard session. Step 3. Traffic control setup. Step 4. Traffic control removal. Step 1. Pre-work preparation has 6 key points. Ensure necessary approvals and permits to work on the road have been obtained. This avoids work interruption and prevents suspension. Perform site evaluation to determine the proper typical layout using Book 7, which can be supplemented by your organization's guide. This will establish safe work zone control through an understanding of work area conditions and the required traffic control provisions. Book 7 represents a minimum standard, but does not address all situations. For situations not covered, utilities must use Book 7 principles along with knowledge, training, and experience to develop an appropriate solution. While other guides may be helpful in developing solutions, Book 7 principles cannot be compromised. Determine the length of the work zone, site distance, traffic volume, and duration of work. This provides direction for proper layout of the work zone dimensions in accordance with Book 7, Table A. Every typical layout indicates which table to use. The typical layouts also help determine whether the yield to oncoming traffic sign may be used. When determining the work duration, remember, very short duration is up to 30 minutes, including setup and removal. Short duration is longer than 30 minutes and up to 24 hours. Prepare a written traffic protection plan. You need to ensure that all staff are trained for traffic control, including temporary traffic control persons and whether or not they are on staff or contract. This will enhance worker safety through a unified plan. It ensures the crew is aware of and understand their responsibilities. Prepare and review emergency and/or Mayday plan. Have an emergency contact number. Typically, the Regional Controlling Authority will initiate the call to EMS, while the crew performs the rescue. This facilitates emergency vehicle response and access to the work zone location. Relying on a set plan provides a successful outcome in the event of a critical injury emergency. In the event of an emergency, notify the appropriate agencies. Agencies may include fire, police, ambulance, or public transit. This ensures worker and public safety and reduces disruption to the provision of other essential services. Step 2, conduct tailboard session has 5 key points. Assemble the crew and complete the job and tailboard discussion as per your organization's accepted practice. This ensures awareness of hazards and necessary protection measures. It also encourages the crew to provide input. Review the selected, modified, or created traffic layout and the crew members' traffic control roles. Recommended distances may not always be possible due to lack of space. Additional active devices may be needed to compensate. This ensures that the crew members understand the work zone layout and protection, as well as their roles in providing safety. Review setup and removal procedures with crew responsible for installing and removing traffic control devices. It helps ensure that the setup and removal are completed safely and efficiently. Remember, plan the work and work the plan. Watch traffic approaching from all directions. This may require a dedicated or part-time observer, depending on the level of exposure to traffic and the ability of workers to see traffic. This provides a warning to exposed workers in case of danger from traffic. The decision to use a dedicated observer is a matter of individual utility policy. Never forget that effective traffic control requires the continual vigilance of everyone involved. Have all crew members sign or initial the traffic protection plan at the end of the tailboard session. This creates a record that the tailboard session was conducted, as well as helps ensure that all workers are aware of the plan and their responsibilities. Step 3, set up traffic control has 3 key points. Use the most appropriate typical layout. Once again, here are the most commonly used typical layouts in the utility industry. When work is completely off the roadway and is of very short duration, this typical layout requires the minimum amount of devices. Where a vehicle is present, use flashing lights. Where no vehicle is present, use cones. The applicable work zone components include advanced warning area and work area. If work is completely off the roadway and is of short duration, it requires an advanced sign. Use the road work ahead sign, also known as the men at work sign. This sign will be used in addition to the flashing lights and cones. The applicable work zone components include advanced warning area and work area. Where work encroaches on the roadway edge and is of very short duration, it too requires an advanced sign. Use flashing lights and cones in addition to this sign. The applicable work zone components include advanced warning area and work area. Use of aerial devices that encroach on the roadway may require temporary use of another typical layout that includes more encroachment. Here are some guidelines when completing your traffic setup. Pre-position devices along the shoulder. This is appropriate for higher volumes, longer work zones, and repeated visits. Set up with one work vehicle by using devices from the vehicle upstream from the start of the work area and proceeding downstream. Just as water in a river comes from the upstream and flows downstream, traffic on a road also comes from the upstream and flows downstream. When you install upstream and work your way downstream, you are always within the enclosure of safety devices. This means that every device you install adds to your protection. While setting up traffic control devices, you can also use a shadow vehicle between live traffic and workers. Shadow vehicles provide a visual, but are not necessarily protection. Assemble traffic control devices off of the roadway. The roadway is not a safe area for workers. Ensure workers are visible to public traffic and to vehicle operators. Follow high visibility apparel requirements. This will ensure that others are aware of where workers are. Plan an escape route. This ensures that workers know what to do in the event of an emergency. Ensure traffic control devices, including work zone and permanent signs, are not obscured. Public traffic may not see or read one of the signs if they are not visible. Ensure the setup corresponds with the typical layout on your traffic protection plan. This demonstrates your organization's due diligence. The ministry looks for consistency. Inspect the setup by viewing it from the upstream end of the work area. This ensures that all devices have been placed where you want them and devices have not been displaced by wind or traffic. These guidelines apply to all typical layouts. This promotes consistency in the setup approach and therefore safety. Now let's look at more typical layouts commonly used in the utility industry. When the work is of either very short or short duration that has a short work area and leaves a lane width of less than 3 meters in the lane adjacent to the encroachment, the visible center line will need to be displaced by using cones to create 2 lanes of traffic without having to close a lane. The applicable work zone components include advanced warning area, approach area, transition area, work area, and the termination area. Refer to the options available in the TL regarding cones, beacons, flashers, and road signs. This ensures oncoming traffic is aware of the work zone, as well as permits flexibility in the devices used. Use 1 or 2 traffic control persons to install the center line, depending on the traffic volume and visibility. Alternatively, 2 installers may be used facing each other as they install, so that they can observe traffic in both directions. If work occurs on a 2-lane low-volume road, which is under 3,000 vehicles per day, and it has a short work zone, which is less than 150 meters, the yield to oncoming traffic sign will need to be used. This typical layout is appropriate for conditions with good visibility, either geometric or weather. This permits passing. Traffic control persons are not required for this typical layout, but they may be used to replace the yield to oncoming traffic sign. The applicable work zone components include advanced warning area, approach area, transition area, and work area. On all other 2-lane roads that do not meet the restrictive conditions of this typical layout, you will require 2 traffic control persons. When traffic control persons do not have a clear line of sight of each other, 2-way radios must be used to communicate. The applicable work zone components include advanced warning area, approach area, transition area, and work area. Estimate traffic control volume by counting traffic in both directions for 3 minutes. If the count is 10 or less vehicles, it's low volume. Use the yield to oncoming traffic sign if conditions of low volume, short work zone, and good visibility are met. This allows traffic to move safely by assigning the right-of-way. Use 2 traffic control persons for TL20A. Operating at higher volumes can only be done safely with 2 traffic control persons. Traffic control persons may not be used at or within 30 meters of signalized intersections or railway crossings. This avoids conflicting signals to drivers and from stopping vehicles on a railway crossing. When a work area occupies 1 full lane of a multi-lane road on a non-freeway and is of a short duration, this typical layout will divert traffic safely around the work zone. The applicable work zone components include advanced warning area, approach area, transition area, longitudinal buffer area, and work area. The arrow board can be used to replace either the right lane closure ahead sign or the lane closure arrow sign, or both, only if the flashing arrow board is at the end of the lane closure taper. It cannot replace either if the flashing arrow board is on a work vehicle beyond the end of the taper. It absolutely needs to be a fail-safe device. A fail-safe device is one that communicates to motorists even if there is a power failure. In this case, if the lights go out, the black arrow signal will still be available for motorists. When using a crash truck on a non-freeway, it must be used the same way as it is used on a freeway. It's unsafe to position the crash truck immediately upstream of the work area or at the end of the taper. For more about crash truck usage, let's look at the next typical layout. If you are performing work on a freeway with 1 lane closure that is of very short duration, you will use this typical layout, which requires a crash truck. The applicable work zone components include advanced warning area, approach area, transition area, longitudinal buffer area, lateral intrusion deterrent gap, and work area. On freeways, use Table C for dimensions rather than Table A or Table B. Due to the higher speeds on freeways, the longer dimensions of Table C are required for safety and smooth flow. Setup procedures are the same as the last typical layout, except a crash truck and a sign truck are required on the shoulder. This ensures a consistency of approach, which contributes to safety. A crash truck is required anytime you are working on a freeway. Protection consists of 3 elements found in Table D of Book 7. 1. Longitudinal buffer area. 2. Crash truck, also known as buffer vehicle. And 3. The lateral intrusion deterrent gap. Remember, never park the crash truck at the end of the taper. If it's struck at the end of the taper, it will enter the work zone. Note usage conventions for arrow and bar indications on the flashing arrow boards. It's important to provide a consistent message to drivers. Now that we've reviewed the typical layouts, let's look at more of the traffic protection elements that apply to all typical layouts. Always start the setup of traffic control devices at the upstream end and work downstream as you install the devices. Every device placed adds to worker protection. Installation in the reverse direction exposes installers to hazards. Refer to the device options that are available to each specific typical layout. This will permit flexibility in the devices used. Step 4, Traffic Control Removal, has 2 key points. Begin removal at the downstream end and work upstream. This leaves in place the maximum protection for the worker removing traffic control devices. Removal in the reverse direction exposes installers to hazards. All best practice guidelines outlined for the setup also apply to the removal procedures. Remember, when working near traffic, the continual vigilance of everyone involved is what keeps the workers and the public safe. This begins with a well-crafted plan.